Hi everyone, I'm Dale Swanton with the Dan Heck team, your source for all things real estate. Now, today is Valentine's Day, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about love letters. What are they? Should you use them when making an offer on a property? And why the state of Oregon has decided to ban them. So let's get into it. Now, for those of you that don't know, a love letter is a term for when a buyer includes a personal letter with their offer in an attempt to kind of create an emotional connection with the seller and help give them an edge in a really competitive real estate market. Oftentimes, these letters include things like why they love the house, how they can see themselves living there, and those kind of things. Sometimes the buyers will even include photos of themselves and their family. Again, the idea here is to try and influence the seller to accept your offer. And they can absolutely work. I mean, I've used them in the past. I remember once a few years ago, I had a buyer that made an offer on a property, and we knew going in that there was 3 other offers on the table. And so my buyer wrote a letter explaining to the seller that their main motivation for making the offer was not only that the house was, the perfect size for their growing family, but it was also in the same neighborhood as one set of parents. And they were thrilled at the idea of having them so close by to help out with childcare, and those kind of things. So when the agent called me to say that the sellers had chosen our offer, she specifically mentioned that we were actually not the highest offer, but that the letter really resonated with the sellers, and that's why they had picked us. So in that specific situation, the love letter did have a positive impact. Now, not everybody thinks that love letters are beneficial. In fact, in late 2021, so just last year, the state of Oregon passed a law banning love letters in real estate transactions. And the reason for the ban has to do with fair housing. So if you aren't familiar with the federal fair housing law, this is an anti-discrimination law that makes it illegal to discriminate in the vast majority of real estate transactions against members of certain protected classes. So these include things like race, religion, sex, marital status, disability, etc. And so proponents of this ban argued that including personal information in a love letter can open up the buyer to potential discrimination. So for example, including a family photo would allow the seller to determine the buyer's race and familial status. Or if you wrote, for example, that, the high ceilings were perfect to put our Christmas tree, would tell the seller about your religion. So the idea being that if the seller was intending to discriminate, whether consciously or unconsciously, these letters make it easier for them to do so. Now, right after this law was approved, another group in the state of Oregon filed a lawsuit against the state, kind of challenging this new law. And they essentially argued that not only is banning these love letters a violation of free speech, but that they can actually help less privileged buyers compete with these larger, like investment firms, by indicating to the seller that they're actually somebody that's going to live in the home and take care of it, as opposed to somebody that's just looking at it as an investment. And we do see that a lot of sellers, they want to see their homes go to somebody who's going to appreciate it as much as they do. And so this group goes on to say that proponents of the ban have yet to provide any concrete evidence that love letters actually led to fair housing complaints or lawsuits. In other words, they're arguing that it's kind of a solution to a problem that does not actually exist. Now, to be fair, it's certainly possible for people to be discriminated against and, not know it. So, obviously they can't report it. For example, like these letters are not made public, and I think it would be extremely difficult for somebody to, kind of point to that letter specifically as the reason they didn't get a house. So, I'm not surprised that there's no evidence of this being an issue. Now, that's not to say that discrimination in housing doesn't exist. The Department of Housing and Urban Development that oversees fair housing enforcement, they receive and investigate literally thousands of fair housing complaints every year. And we can certainly point to some recent examples of people being discriminated against in housing. For example, just last year, we had a black couple in California who ordered an appraisal on their home, and when it came in much lower than what they were expecting, they decided to order a second appraisal, which, it's not uncommon. Now, I don't know what led them to believe that they were being discriminated against, but for whatever reason, this time around, they had one of their white friends pose as the owner of the property. So the white friend met the appraiser, they removed all of the family photos and anything from the house that would kind of indicate that it was owned by a black family. And so the second appraisal came back and the house was valued at nearly $500,000 higher than the first. And this certainly isn't concrete proof of discrimination, but it certainly suggests that there was some type of bias, potentially discrimination going on. And that situation is not unique. I mean, this may be one of the more extreme examples, but there have been numerous studies that have been published showing that homes in minority neighborhoods are consistently valued less than similar homes in predominantly white neighborhoods. Perhaps a more concrete example is what came out of a 3-year investigation into the behavior of real estate agents in Long Island, New York, back in 2019. And this was an investigation that involved testers kind of going undercover and posing as buyers who would then contact various agents and kind of see if their responses were different based on the race of the person that was calling. And what they found was widespread bias where, for example, we had agents that were steering, black candidates towards predominantly black neighborhoods, but then telling white candidates who wanted to see homes in that same neighborhood, that was not a good place to live and that they should kind of look elsewhere. There were also examples of agents showing white buyers homes without any proof of their ability to purchase, so they didn't have a pre-approval letter or anything like that, but then demanding proof from minority buyers that wanted to look at the same properties. So this investigation was incredibly damaging to the real estate community. It led to many lawsuits and I believe some changes in the laws in the state of New York. So certainly discrimination in real estate does exist. I don't think we can deny that. But the question is, do love letters specifically lead to increased discrimination? Now, while I do see the potential for that to happen, I think the pros of using them far outweigh the cons. For one, it really should be up to the buyers to decide if they want to use them or not. And as long as the agent is properly explaining the potential negatives, and the buyer is willing to move forward with that letter despite the risks, then they should absolutely have the right to do so. And it's also possible to draft a letter that really doesn't reveal anything to the seller that could be used to violate fair housing. So I don't think, banning letters altogether is really, the solution. And lastly, let's face it, if someone's intent is to discriminate against you, it's really not that hard to do. The sellers, they see the buyer's name on the offer. Oftentimes they can make inferences about whether or not that person, belongs to a certain minority group just based on, having a foreign sounding last name, for example. It's 2022, we can Google things, you can look somebody up on social media, you're likely to find photos and other information about them. So, again, I don't think banning love letters is necessarily going to prevent any type of discrimination. Now, as of this recording, it's February 14th of 22. That law in Oregon has gone into effect. It started January 1st of this year, and the litigation to reverse that is still ongoing. And at this point, no other state has decided to follow Oregon's lead. However, the National Association of Realtors has issued some guidelines for agents urging them not to accept these letters on their listings. I think they're just trying to err on the side of caution there. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about these love letters. Have you ever used one? Do you like them? Do you agree that they should be outlawed? Please put your thoughts and comments below. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thanks so much. Have a great day.